The difficulties began on October 15, 2010 at 7:30 a.m. I was at Wilcox Airfield waiting for my flight to Nassau when two men in ill-fitting suits approached me. They stopped in front of me and I looked up from my iPad to look at the two impassive faces. "Mr. Kavanaugh, would you like to come with us?" asked one of them. "Polite guys," they even said. "You're welcome." "Who are you and what do you need from me?" I asked. "I'm Special Agent Washington and this is Special Agent Brown. We're from the FBI," the second man replied. "Can I see your ID?" I asked. They pulled out the laminated badges and the photos matched, since I had no idea what a real FBI badge looked like. I took his word for it. "I'm afraid we're here to arrest you," Washington said. "You are charged with insider trading by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Will you come with us, please?" I stood up and followed them down the hallway and through a door into a room with a table and 4 chairs. They informed me of my rights and took out handcuffs. Really, I thought, they're gonna march me through the airport in handcuffs for insider trading. It turned out that this was only half true. They let me take my jacket to hide the handcuffs from prying eyes. They took my iPad, took me to Miramore to their headquarters, and put me in another room with only 3 chairs. 30 minutes later, Agents Washington and Brown came in and sat down. They read out a list of charges. According to them, I was involved in a hacking scheme to obtain corporate press releases before they were published and was part of a group that made over $100 million from our shenanigans. They wanted to ask me some questions. "Sorry, agent," I said. "I intend to remain silent and would like to speak with a lawyer." They tried to convince me that it would be in my best interest to answer their questions. But I stood my ground. These agents were not my friends, and I intended not to answer any of their questions. They took me to a table and allowed me to use the phone. I asked for a telephone directory because I didn't know any lawyers. They gave me the phone directory, and I looked through the impressive list. I didn't have the slightest idea. I chose a beautiful ad at random. A man answered the phone, and I told him I needed a lawyer. He asked me about the nature of the matter, and I told him what was happening. He switched my call, and a woman answered. "Hello, this is Tyler Atkins," she said. "How can I help you, Mr. Kavanaugh?" I repeated my story, and she told me to be quiet and that she would be there in an hour. They brought me back to my room, and I cooled down. After 50 minutes, the door opened, and one of the most stunning women I have ever seen walked into the room. She must have been about 6 feet tall. She had flaming red hair, the face of a model, and that clear, creamy redhead skin. Her eyes were an icy blue, and her legs seemed endless in that skirt. Damn, she was great. She introduced herself and shook my hand. Her fingers were long, slender, and cool, and her handshake was firm. I guessed that she was somewhere around 40. It turned out that I was mistaken for 7 years. She sat down in a chair and read the list of charges. She looked at me. "Mr. Kavanaugh, you have a big problem," she said. "Did you do it?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "For the purposes of my representation, you are not," she said. "For me personally, yes, it makes a big difference." "Well, I didn't do it," I told her. "I have never hacked a computer. I don't know how to do it. I have not participated in any schemes, and I have never received press releases before they were released publicly. I would not engage in any insider trading if I could, and I am completely innocent of these charges." She looked at me doubtfully, and her eyes pierced my soul. "Okay," she said, "we will act on these allegations. If I find out later that you lied to me, it won't be nice, you know?" "Great," I said. "Let's see how we can get you out of here. Is there someone you need to talk to?" "My wife," I said. "I'd like to talk to the kids too, but that can wait until I get out of here." "Let's see what I can do," she said. She left, and I didn't see anyone for 3 hours. I was about to pee on the floor when Agent Brown walked in with Miss Atkins. "I arranged bail for you," she said. "You will have to surrender your passport, and you should know that all your bank accounts are frozen." "How are you doing with money? Will my credit cards work?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow at Brown, and he cleared his throat. "They're frozen too," he said. "You won't be able to use them." "Will I get my wallet back?" I asked. "Yes, all your personal items will be returned," she said. "Except for your iPad, I'm afraid. That one is now evidence." "Then the money is okay, and I'm ready to go. Well, as soon as Agent Brown points me to the toilet." "I'll be ready," I said. They gave me an envelope with my things, and I went out with her. "Come see me tomorrow at 10 in the morning," she said. She gave me her business card and called us a taxi. "Want to use my phone to call my wife?" she asked. I called home and the answering machine came on. I left a short message saying my trip was canceled, that I would be home in an hour, and gave her the phone back. The taxis arrived, and I went home. When I arrived, no one was home, and I prepared myself something to eat. It was difficult to concentrate, but I managed. I needed to call the kids, find out where Kelly was, and figure out some things. Daniel and Patricia weren't home either, so I left them messages asking them to call me back. After I ate, I called my boss, John Sinclair. He told me that I was fired and that my personal belongings were packed and sent home. I lost my trader's license, and he was sure I would never work in the industry again. Moreover, he was looking forward to seeing me receive a long prison sentence. Well, that wasn't good. I was now unemployed and facing criminal charges. Kelly didn't come home that night, and when I called her, the phone went to voicemail. I didn't know if she heard or what. She heard, but apparently she left me. Now I'm thinking about children. What did they hear? If Kelly heard, I'm sure she told them. The next morning, I attended a meeting with Miss Atkins. She said that we have a lot of paperwork to do. It won't be fast. "Mr. Kavanaugh, how are you going to pay for my services?" she asked. "If I am acquitted, it will not be a problem." I replied, "It might be in your best interest for this to happen." She laughed. I liked hearing her laugh and decided that I would try to make her laugh more often. "We have a big day ahead of us," she said. "Let's start. What do you think happened, and how are you going to help me prove your innocence?" I asked for a list of names of people involved in the case. She said they hadn't done a preliminary investigation yet, so she didn't really have any details. This was to happen as soon as she could meet with the FBI and the SEC. "I'm afraid I have no idea until I know exactly what happened," I told her. "Once I have a clear idea, we will get to work." We discussed a few more issues, and I signed 1,000,000 papers. When we ran out of ink and free signature lines, I went home. I had a dozen messages on my answering machine. Surprisingly, they were from Kelly and the kids. They had problems. They were stuck in Belmopan. Their credit cards weren't working. Well, nothing surprising. She had some money with her, but it wouldn't last long. She needed my help. Strange, but the children were with her. Their messages were the same, but neither of them attempted to explain why they were in Belize. The situation became increasingly strange. I had only been home for 5 minutes when the phone rang. It was Kelly. "Hi, Selden," she sounded upset. "Listen, dear, I don't have much time. We're stuck at the airport, and I need my credit cards to work. Could you call the bank and find out what's wrong? I'm afraid it won't do anything." I replied, "Kelly, I've been arrested and charged with insider trading. The cards you have won't work. Is there any way you could send me money?" she asked. "Approximately how much do you need?" I asked. "Just enough to buy tickets home," she said. "I'll see what I can do," I replied. "All our bank accounts are frozen." "Okay, honey," she said. "Please hurry. Thanks for the help." This was the weirdest conversation I've ever had. Again, there was no explanation as to why she and the children were in Belize. No questions about the arrest. Nothing about anything, really. She should have been shocked by every word I said, but nothing like that. Perhaps it was due to the lack of time she mentioned. I would answer all questions when she returns. Some time ago, I rented a warehouse space. I went there and opened the safe in the cedar chest that my mother had left me. I took enough cash to last me until this is all over. I sent money for tickets to Kelly and the kids and drank whiskey to calm my nerves. I sat and thought until I went to sleep and then lay awake for a long time, thoughts spinning in my head. The next morning I was woken up by the phone ringing. It was someone from Miss Atkins' office. She conducted a preliminary investigation, and now all the information on the case was available. She invited a computer expert to discuss the information with us, and I was scheduled to show up at 10 a.m. I showered and became human, then got into a taxi and went to her office. Her computer expert turned out to be a very attractive young woman named Lainey. The trail turned out to be pretty cold, and while I'm not a computer expert myself, I do know my way around a computer, and between her and me, we were able to discover enough to start to understand what was going on. It turned out that most of the transactions were carried out when I was not at home. I was in another country on the day of several of them, and I saw how Miss Atkins began to believe in me. "Mr. Kavanaugh, who knows your password?" she asked. "Kelly knows the password to my computer," I said. "The people at work know my work passwords, as do my bosses. They don't know the password for my home computer." "Does Kelly know your work passwords?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I don't give them to anyone, not even her." It was obvious that someone, presumably with Kelly's consent, was trying to set me up. But why? Where could Kelly get this information? I had press release files on my computer containing information that would be extremely valuable to investors, but the dates on the files on my computer were usually a week before the date on the press releases. This meant that anyone with access to my computer could use this information to make trades before the public knew the news. Most press releases passed through the desk of my boss, John Sinclair, but his deals would be scrutinized. If he had made trades based on these press releases before they were published, he would have quickly been accused of insider trading. So he apparently funneled information to Kelly so she could make trades without arousing suspicion. Why use my computer? Then I realized it was to set me up. John had to use my computer at work when I was away from my desk. When they showed up on routine checks, it triggered a search on my home computer. Completing my setup, I met Kelly 2 years ago at a company party while accompanying my boss, John Sinclair. I was confused because John was married and not to Kelly. John saw my confusion and immediately gave an explanation. His wife Lucille was not feeling well, so he asked Kelly, a family friend, to come to her place. I had no reason not to believe him, and Kelly seemed like a very charming woman. As the evening went on, she seemed to spend more time with me than with John. He even asked me if I would mind taking Kelly home so he could go back to Lucille, and I readily agreed. Kelly explained that she is divorced with 2 children, Daniel, 18, and Patricia, 16, who were spending the weekend with their father. We soon began to meet regularly. I was surprised that we rarely saw her children, and when we did, they were quite hostile towards me. After a whirlwind romance, I proposed to Kelly and was delighted when she accepted, but I was again surprised that Daniel and Patricia did not attend the wedding. "Oh, they're still upset about the divorce," Kelly said. This surprised me. We had been dating for almost a year, and I assumed she had been divorced long before that. I pushed it out of my thoughts for a while and enjoyed the wedding reception. When I got back to the bar, I went looking for Kelly and found her on the dance floor with John. They were dancing too close for a bride-to-be, so I set down their drinks and walked over to intervene. They both hesitated for a moment, as if I was intruding, but they quickly separated, and I took my bride in my arms and danced the next few dances with her. Back at our table, I mentioned to Kelly that she and John had walked too close to the line of what was acceptable for a bride to be at a wedding. Kelly laughed. "Oh, don't be stupid," she said. "John is just an old family friend. You have nothing to worry about." She made it seem so reasonable, but I noticed that Kelly and John were almost avoiding each other. For the rest of the evening, we left the reception and went on our honeymoon. We settled into a more less normal household routine. Daniel and Patricia were another matter. They didn't even try to sound like we were in a relationship, and Kelly just shrugged. I finally accepted that this is the way it is, and that hopefully it will improve over time. I came home from work a few weeks later to find Daniel and Patricia sitting in the living room, having received only a grunt from them in response to my greeting. I asked, "Is your mother at home?" Silence. I said, "Is your mom home?" Daniel remained silent, but Patricia gave in. "She's upstairs taking a shower," she said. I stood there for a minute and then decided that enough of this nonsense was enough. "Listen," I said, "you clearly don't love me very much, and I guess that this is not uncommon in second marriages, but you seem to hate me, and if we're going to be any kind of family, you're going to have to put up with it." The silence continued. Then Patricia spoke. "We hate you," she said, "and always will because you destroyed our family." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Your mother was already divorced when I met her." "No," Daniel finally spoke. "She filed for divorce only 2 months after you started dating. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks before your wedding." I stood there dumbfounded. I literally had no words. "Guys, I'm sorry, but you have to believe me. Your mom told me she's divorced. I would never date a married woman." "Yet, of course," Daniel said, "that's not what she said, and who should we believe? Our mother or the man who destroyed our family?" They both stood up and left the room, Patricia running in tears. Well, I thought. Wow, I went upstairs to the master bathroom and pulled back the shower curtain. "Oh," Kelly laughed. "Aren't you overdressed to join me?" "It's not funny, Kelly," I said, barely able to contain myself. "The kids just told me you were married when we started dating." "Of course, dear, I told you about this, but we were divorced. You didn't say anything like that to me. You told me you were divorced. I would never date a married woman, even if she was divorced. Whatever, we are together now, and that's the main thing. So how about you take these things off and join me in washing my back and front?" I was still excited, but what could I say? I'm just a man and I'm weak, and she's hot. I shed my clothes in record time and jumped into the shower. But the events of that day will stay with me for a long time. Often, when I had a free moment, I thought about what was happening, but usually I did not have time to think about it until one evening. I was left alone at home for the whole evening. I sat in my office, glass of wine in hand, and two thoughts became clear in my mind. One of the things some people I know have said when discussing guys who date women who cheat on their husbands is, if she cheats with you, she will cheat on you. While I didn't see any obvious signs of Kelly cheating, she had plenty of opportunities. Like that night at the bachelorette party. Another thought was about her dancing with John at our wedding. At the time, it seemed more or less innocent, but now I wasn't so sure. Then I remembered how we met when she was at a party on John's arm because Lucille was sick. It was a stretch, but it was all I had at that moment. I decided to take the next day off from the office and called Lucille to see if we could meet for coffee. She was puzzled, to say the least, but agreed, and we met at a local Starbucks. We exchanged a friendly hug and a kiss on the cheek, grabbed coffee, and sat down. I was stopped not knowing how to start our conversation, but Lucille took the bull by the horns. "Okay, Seldom," she said, "you asked for this meeting. So what's bothering you?" I took a deep breath and let it out. "Lucille," I began, "do you remember March 2 years ago when we had that job that you couldn't come to?" "Well," she said, "that's not entirely true. I could have come, but John told me it was for employees. Only no spouses." That was a hammer blow between the eyes. "What happened, Selden?" she asked. "You look like your best friend died. Perhaps you are not so far from the truth." "Lucille, you know my wife, Kelly, of course." "Yes, I was at your wedding, remember? She was a wonderful bride." Yes, she was." "Do you know how we met?" Lucille shook her head in denial. "She was at the same party. She was on John's arm. He told me that she is here because you are sick. I think we both know now that he was lying. I didn't tell her about my suspicions that Kelly and John might have something else going on. I felt like a complete jerk for not telling her, but I didn't want her to confront him until I had all my cards stacked. I made a copy of Patagonia and cloned Kelly's phone so I now had access to all her calls and texts. It didn't take me long to confirm there romance, but it was other things that made me shiver. "Hi, John, it's Kelly." "Hey, baby, what's the news?" said John. "Everything is set on my end. Selden thinks I'm going to a party with the girls, and I've got everything set up with Angela to cover for me. Can you get away?" "From the old chain?" "No problem," he said. "I told her I was taking some clients from out of town for me to lure you in." "Are you serious, Kelly?" he asked. "What normal man could resist you?" "God knows you couldn't," she said, if I hadn't already been in a state of bewilderment. The next part of their conversation certainly would have done so. "Did you make the trades I told you to make?" he said. "Yes, of course, but I still don't understand." "Why you want me to use Selden's computer?" There was a pause. I could imagine him rolling his eyes. "Because when we make our move, we'll need a scapegoat to take the blame." "Selden," she said. "Yes, Selden," he said. "He'll probably be able to get out of this if he's really lucky, but by the time they figure it out, we'll be long gone. Have you told the kids yet?" "Not yet, but that shouldn't be a problem. They hate him for ruining our family." When I explain that we're taking his ill-gotten gains and are going to live big on a Caribbean island, I don't think they'll be too keen on upset. "Okay, but be careful. Kids can react strangely when they have to leave friends and stuff behind." "Don't worry, I can handle them." "Okay, it's your choice, at the usual time and place." "Yes, goodbye." "Goodbye, Kelly." I turned off the recording and leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. Damn, what a confusing mess, as much as I suspected their affair, to hear it discussed so openly and coldly, and to learn that our relationship was a lie shook me to the core. I knew we hadn't known each other that long, but I loved her with all my heart and thought she felt the same about me. Now there was something bigger at play, something illegal that they were trying to frame me for. I didn't know what to do, but I definitely needed more information. If she was involved in such a scheme, she would have to hide the money somewhere. But where? I installed spyware on both my computers, home and work. Almost immediately I hit the mark. John used early press releases for insider trades and had Kelly execute them from my home computer, and sometimes he made some trades from my work computer. I didn't understand why they used both computers. Perhaps it was to maximize the chances of me getting caught. I wasn't sure if that was their original intention, but it was obvious that they were going to set me up and use this as a distraction while they made off with their ill-gotten gains. Even more depressing was listening to her conversations with Daniel and Patricia. I knew they hated me because Kelly convinced them that I was to blame for this destruction of her marriage. Forget that, even if it was true. She was the one who cheated on their father, and as I now understand, she had already cheated on him with John. They were very excited when she told them that John had uncovered my insider trading scheme. "That's great," Daniel said. "We can turn him over to the police and get him out of our lives. Maybe you and Daddy can get back together." "No, kid," she said. "I'm afraid that ship has already sailed. Besides, John and I have another plan. We're gonna steal his loot and then let the police catch him. That means we'll have to leave the country for a while, but we will live on a beautiful island in the Caribbean. What about school, our friends? We'll figure something out. Don't worry. We'll have a lot of money. Maybe you can invite your friends on vacation, and once your stepfather is in jail, we can come back." I couldn't tell if the kids really believed it, but there were no more objections. Further tracking revealed that they were transferring funds to a Belize bank account. Thanks to the spyware, I now had access to this account. I wasn't sure what exactly would happen, but I decided that I would need a ready source of cash. I started making irregular cash withdrawals from my checking and savings accounts, not large enough to attract attention, and not always the same amounts. Once I had enough, I hid them in a safe I had in a storage room. I bought a new laptop. When I found out they were going to make their move, I logged into her account and transferred the money to another bank in Barbados. I kept transferring them until they ended up in a bank in the Cayman Islands. Right after I left For the airport, I knew that Kelly and the kids were heading to Belize. John stayed behind. They didn't say why, but I guess it was to complete my setup. Meaning Kelly and the kids at the airport was another surreal experience. Kelly rushed over and put her arm around my neck, while Daniel and Patricia stood there with the strangest expressions on their faces. Since I spoke to her while she was stuck in Belize, she has never expressed surprise or concern about my legal problems. "Oh, Selden," she said. "Thank you very much. I didn't know what to do. I had no money and the credit cards weren't working." "Yes, Kelly," I said. "I understand all this, but what were you doing in Belize? We didn't talk about any trips. And why didn't you have return tickets? After all, you probably bought round-trip tickets." "Oh, honey, let's not talk about it now. I just want to go home and relax." We all got into my car and headed home. "Okay, Kelly, I understand," I said. Little did she know how well I understood everything. We hadn't been home 15 minutes before she called John. "Oh, John," she cried, "it was terrible. I went to the bank, just like you said, and there was no money." "What do you mean, there wasn't?" "Exactly what I said. The account was closed, and the money was transferred to a bank in Barbados. When I called the bank, they didn't tell me anything because I didn't have the right access codes." "You didn't do anything, did you, John?" "Of course not," he said. "Why would I do that?" "I don't know," she said, "but you better hope I don't find out you did it." She hung up. Things turned out even better than I had planned. I sowed the seeds of mistrust between them. This could only help my plans. Kelly came back into the room looking innocent and worried, even though I almost believed her. "So tell me, Selden," she said, "what is this story about the arrest? Insider trading?" "I wish I knew, Kelly," I said. "I was at the airport waiting for a flight to Nassau when 2 FBI agents approached me and arrested me. But for what? It looks like they found some early press releases on my computer with deals based on information from them. I have no idea why they checked my computer in the first place, let alone how the information ended up there." "You did it?" she asked. "What? Of course not, Kelly. You know me better." "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have asked. So how did the information end up on your computer?" "This is where things get interesting," I said. "Most of the computer activity happened while I was out of town." Kelly was a little taken aback by this, but quickly recovered. "So how do you think she ended up there?" "Well," I said, "that's the $64,000 question, isn't it?" "What? What do you mean?" "I think it's obvious. Do you have any idea how this could have happened?" "Of course not, Selden," she said. "Where would I get this kind of information, let alone know what to do with it?" "Okay, Kelly, I believe you," I said. "We'll just have to wait for the investigators to finish their work." "Yes, of course," I thought. "I believe you only as much as I can throw at you." Her eyes started nervously, and I could smell the fear as I left the room, pulling my phone out of my pocket. Almost immediately, I received a signal that she was making a call, and it did not surprise me that it was John Sinclair. John," she said as soon as he answered. "Selden knows. I don't know how he knew, but he knows." "Calm down, Kelly," he said. "There is no way he could know anything. If he knew, he would have already called the police on us." "You're probably right," she said. "But something strange is happening. And where did the money go? If you didn't take them and I didn't take them, then who?" "I wish I knew, Kelly. I wish I knew." My next meeting with Miss Atkins was quite interesting. She met with prosecutors, and although they agreed that the evidence seemed to exonerate me, they still weren't sure I wasn't somehow involved. This was not entirely unreasonable, given that the trades were carried out on my computer. Things were further complicated by my growing attraction to Miss Atkins. I obviously thought she was beautiful at first sight, but as we worked together on my case, her pure sexuality overwhelmed my senses. And she had the personality and intelligence to match. She gently rebuffed all of my attempts to go beyond a professional relationship, and when I persisted, she reminded me that I was her client, and it was unethical for her to enter into a personal relationship with me. I tried to argue that this would only make her work harder for me, but she just laughed and shook her head. I didn't know how I would do it, but I was determined to win against this woman. Kelly was brought in for questioning, and I learned through the grapevine that she was still trying to pin the blame on me. Then she came to me in tears. "Selden, please, you must know that I am innocent. I would never try to set you up. I love you." I barely had the strength not to laugh in her face. "I know, Kelly, I know. Do not worry, everything will be fine. Is there some way that someone else could be on my computer? Was there someone in the house? I didn't know if she cheated on me in our home, but I couldn't figure out why not." "No, Selden," she said, "of course not." God, how I felt like a villain, but it was so right. She definitely deserved everything that happened to her. Maybe it was the children. They always hated me, blaming me for ruining your marriage. Kelly was so shocked, but it took her several minutes to respond. "This is absurd, Selden," she said. "Even if they hate you as much as you say, where could they get such information?" "Well, if it wasn't them, and no one else was here, then it had to be." Kelly covered her mouth and ran out of the room. The police continued to bring Kelly in for questioning, but they simply had no evidence other than that the transactions were made on my computer, and there was no evidence that she made them. When investigators discovered that all the press releases had passed through John's desk, he was also called in for questioning, but he refused to answer questions. An anonymous call tipped them off to his relationship with Kelly, and a search of phone records confirmed it. Her one-way trip to Belize and bank records there confirmed their fate. It didn't take them long to get Kelly to cooperate with John. Their trials were almost a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. With Kelly's admission to her role in the scheme, Kelly threw herself at my feet. "Please, Selden," she said, "you must believe me. I never wanted to do this. John forced me." "Give me peace, Kelly," I said. "I know everything. I know you cheated on your first husband with John, and you and John were together when you seduced me. I'm not sure if you planned to use me in your scheme from the very beginning, but that doesn't matter anymore. It's over, Kelly. And it looks like Daniel and Patricia will get their wish to be with their father. Although not with you. I don't think you'll have a problem getting custody when their mother is a convicted felon, right?" Kelly simply burst into tears when the bailiff came to take her away. Since neither she nor John were willing or able to return the money, they were not eligible for a reduced sentence. She will have to serve 5 years, and John will have to serve 10. The children never wanted to talk to me before leaving with their father. They still blamed me for the destruction of their family, and I think they blamed me for Kelly's arrest as well. Tyler was able to get my arrest annulled and my trader's license reinstated. Even though I had no intention of returning to my old company, Tyler invited me out for drinks to celebrate our victory, and I was only too happy to accept. After our drinks were served, I got right down to business. "So," I asked, "so are we done? Case closed?" "Yes," she said, "you are free." "Great," I said, "you're fired." She almost choked on her drink. "What? Why?" "Well, you told me about some ethical rules about dating clients." "Yes, I have such rules, but I don't understand how." Suddenly a spark of understanding lit up in her eyes. "I must be the stupidest woman on the planet," she said, "especially for a lawyer. I just didn't realize it. Now that you have figured it out, what do you think? Do we? Do we have a chance?" "There's always a chance," she said. "I just honestly didn't think of you that way." "I feel the word, but," I said. "Yes, but," she said, "we did not meet under other circumstances. We met as an attorney-client, and you were accused of a serious crime. But I was innocent. I protested." "I don't want to get into the legal stuff," she said. "The police decided they didn't have enough evidence to pursue charges against you. Plus, they had more evidence against John and Kelly. It's not quite the same as being innocent. To quote Dickens, 'The law is an ass,'" I said. Tyler laughed her charming laugh. "This isn't the first time I've heard this. And I'm not saying it's not true, but that's the way it is. You still haven't answered my question. Will you go on a date with me? You're persistent," she said. "Okay, I'll go with you, but I'll tell you in advance that things won't go any further until we've had some very serious conversations. My inner censor tells me that you still haven't told me the whole story, and I'll get it out of you one way or another. My ears perked up at this. What did she know or think she knew? You may well try, I said. I'm sure you can be very persuasive. She just gave me a knowing smile and a wink as we agreed to dinner on Friday and parted with a warm handshake and a kiss on the cheek. When Friday evening arrived and we had dinner, the conversation was pleasant, but there was tension. Throughout the evening, Tyler had her suspicions about me and I was worried about hers. I received a much warmer kiss goodbye, but that was all. We had our second and third dates, and our goodbye kisses became more and more passionate, but there was still a barrier between us. I was torn. I knew I was in love with Tyler, and I believed she loved me too, but she couldn't give herself completely to me while I hid part of myself from her, and I was afraid that if I opened up to her, I might lose her. We continued to meet regularly, but there was always an elephant in the room. In our conversations, sometimes I felt like I was being cross-examined. This seriously complicated our relationship. Tyler refused to deepen it because she wasn't sure of me and believed that trust was critical to any relationship. Given my experience with Kelly, I could understand her concerns, but I could never muster the strength to fully open up to her. It all came to a head as we made out on her couch. Things were about to get very hot when she slammed on the brakes for the umpteenth time. But this time everything was different. "Selden," she said, "I can't go on like this. What do you want to break up with me?" "I don't want this, Selden. I'm really falling in love with you, but I just can't be with someone I can't trust." "Why? What did I do to make you not trust me?" "Come on, Selden," she said. "You can't be that naive. You clearly know more about your business than you've told anyone." This anonymous call was too convenient not to mention the missing money. I found myself between a rock and a hard place. If I don't confess, our relationship will probably end. But if I tell her everything, we might still break up, and I don't know what kind of legal trouble I might get into. I took a deep breath and decided to tell her the truth. Let it be. One thing was for sure, I didn't want to lose her, and that was my only hope. "Okay, Tyler, I'll tell you everything and hope and pray that you'll want to be with me." Tyler looked a little shocked, probably thinking I was going to tell her, then nodded for me to continue. I told her how we met, the children's reactions to our marriage, and finally my conversation with Lucille that revealed John and Kelly's lies. I then told her about the phone cloning and not only confirming the scam, but also how I found out about their insider trading scheme. I didn't even have to tell her about moving the money and making the call. It was obvious to her. I bowed my head, putting my face in my hands, completely exhausted, not knowing if these would be my last moments here. When I looked up, Tyler was very calm. She seemed lost in thought. "I can't say I didn't suspect something like this," she said, "but it's still a little shocking to hear. It's straight from you." I nodded in understanding. "I hear you," I said, "but what about us now?" "I can't say right now. I need time to digest all this. I think you should go now. I'll call you when I'm ready." I hesitated for a moment, but realized that my best hope was to respect her wishes. I stood up, kissed the top of her head, and left. The next few days were the worst of my life. I both longed and dreaded her call. I also wondered if the police would come to my home. The following Friday, the phone rang. The name Tyler was on the display. I answered the phone nervously. "Hey, Tyler," I said anxiously. "Hey, Selden, I've made some decisions. Can you come over for dinner tonight around 7, and then we can talk?" "Sure, Tyler, whatever you say." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, feeling somewhat relieved that she wanted to talk and didn't just tell me to disappear. I rang her doorbell, and she greeted me with a sweet kiss on the lips before I followed her into the kitchen. I didn't know how much appetite I'd have or if I'd be able to hold down food, but I went to the refrigerator for a can of Pepsi and sat down at the table when she shooed me away from the stove. We had a pleasant dinner with casual conversation. Luckily, it was a very light dinner. I don't think I could handle anything serious. After dinner, she let me help with the dishes. Then we went into the living room and sat on opposite ends of the couch. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I didn't want to rush her, and she obviously needed time to collect her thoughts. Selden, she began, I can't say I'm not disappointed that you didn't tell me all this when I took your case. I was your lawyer. You could and should have trusted me. I'm also offended that you continued to hide it when we started dating. But having said that, I sympathize with your feelings of betrayal that have made it difficult for you to open up. Even to me, I also appreciate that you eventually confessed even if I had to push you a little. She smiled at me slyly. Ultimately, my decision was quite simple. I love you, Selden, and I know that you love me. I have one condition before we continue our relationship. I hope I'm not sticking my neck out too far, but I'll do anything for you, Tyler. I thought you would say that. Don't worry, I don't think you'll have a problem with it. So what is it, Tyler? The tension is killing me. It's money, Selden. I don't feel comfortable holding this money. What can we do about it? There aren't many ways to find out who they really belong to. Actually, this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I think I've found the answer. What is it, Tyler? I asked. Money certainly doesn't do any good where it is now. That was an interesting choice of words, Selden, because I was thinking about doing something good with them. Do you have anything specific in mind? I'm open to almost anything you want to do. As you know, both my parents died of cancer. I'd like to donate it to cancer research. That's a great idea, Tyler. I will begin making the necessary arrangements tomorrow morning. Tyler came over to me, sat on my lap, and kissed me deeply. I began to seriously hope that everything would be fine. So where do we go from here, Tyler? I suggest you take me to bed. I was stunned. Get your thoughts out of the ditch, Selden. I just want to fall asleep in your arms. Oh sure, I mumbled as she laughed at my reaction. We went upstairs, and she let me use the bathroom. First, giving me a spare toothbrush. I used the toilet, washed my face, brushed my teeth, and was done in 10 minutes. When she came out of the bathroom, I was already lying in bed, wrapped in sheets. I just lay there with my hands behind my head, amazed at how my life had changed. Tyler soon emerged from the bathroom, dressed in a skimpy nightgown. I couldn't even tell if there was anything underneath it. She climbed into bed and snuggled up to my side, placing her head on my chest and her hand on my stomach. I hugged her, pulled her closer, and kissed her forehead. I love you so much, Tyler, I said. I still can't believe you could love me. You better believe I wouldn't have gone through all this if I hadn't been in love, she said. She turned off the light, and although it was still early, we soon fell asleep. Donations to various cancer research and treatment organizations. Each one was large enough to be appreciated and useful in some way, but not so large that it attracted unwanted attention. There is one last piece left in the puzzle that has been my life for the past couple of years. Tyler and I were sitting in the living room having our afternoon drinks when there was a gentle knock on the front door. I stood up to answer and was shocked to see Daniel and Patricia standing there looking very nervous. Can I come in? Asked Daniel. Of course, I said, puzzled. I motioned for them to come in and close the door. They followed me into the living room, and Tyler stood up. Tyler, these are my adopted children, Daniel and Patricia. Startled, Tyler shook their hands. Please, she said, take a seat. Can I get you a drink? Daniel looked at Patricia, who shook her head. No, he said, I don't think we'll stay that long. Okay, I said, why are you here? We came to apologize, Daniel said. It was unexpected. Apologize? For what? I asked. My surprise must have been visible on my face because Patricia continued. We visited our mother yesterday, she said. I'm sure it's been hard for you. But what does that have to do with me? She told us the truth about your relationship. Daniel said that she told you that she was divorced. It was more than that, Patricia added. She also admitted that she had already cheated on our father with John Sinclair. Well, I said, I really appreciate you coming to tell me this. I'm sure the situation has been very difficult for you. They both nodded. Can I ask you something? I said. They looked at me and nodded. I understand your feelings towards me, especially considering what you were told. But even if it were true, your mother was not without guilt. Were you old enough to choose? Why did you stay with her and not with your father? Daniel just smiled sadly. These were more of her lies, he said. She tried to blame the scam on him. He worked too many hours, traveled a lot, neglected her, the usual excuses. She conveniently left out the fact that she was a housewife with expensive tastes, and he had to work hard to support her lifestyle. I just shook my head as they stood up to leave. I shook hands with Daniel and briefly hugged. Patricia, I have to say again that I appreciate you telling me all of this. It shows real character. If I ever need anything, thank you. But that's really not necessary, Daniel said. Our father is in control. We have a lot of work to do to repair our relationship, but I think we will succeed. I walked them to the door, then sat back down with Tyler. Ugh, I said, that was really unexpected. Yeah, Tyler said, they seem like good kids. Yeah, it's like bad news, good news, I said. Like this. The bad news is that Kelly ruined our marriage and ruined my relationship with my two good kids. And the good news is that it led me to you, I said, pushing her gently and kissing her passionately. Our tongues immediately intertwined in a duel. Before we got too far, Tyler stood up, pulling me with her. I think it would be more convenient somewhere else, she said, leading me to the bedroom. Not being a fool, I wasted no time following her. It seems to me that this is not so difficult at all. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.